Digital technology and artificial intelligence are transforming every aspect of our lives. Let's explore how these modern tools are fighting age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in the United States. The disease starts with the so-called dry form, with around 10% of patients converting to the more devastating wet form, which is characterized by the growth of blood vessels under the macula that leak fluid into the retina. We talked to Dr. Richard Garfinkel from the Retina Group of Washington about his vast experience in treating patients with AMD.
When I started as an ophthalmologist, a wet AMD diagnosis meant almost certain vision blindness for patients. Losing vision is extremely hard because quality of life is severely impacted, but it was also demoralizing for us as physicians to not be able to provide any solutions.
Around 2004, the first anti-angiogenesis drugs were coming to the market to treat cancer. These drugs stopped the growth of blood vessels, so they had the potential to help wet AMD patients maintain their vision. These treatments showed remarkable efficacy in clinical trials.
There was a lot of excitement relating to the results of the clinical trials being done with anti-angiogenesis drugs. They gave new hope to patients. The availability of treatment changed how doctors managed their wet AMD patients. There was no question that these drugs helped. But when physicians took a closer look, we realized that real-world data wasn't as good as clinical trials. For instance, if we look at the retrospective Sierra AMD study covering more than 90,000 eyes, we see that while the deterioration in vision loss stopped, the average patient didn't gain much of their vision back. The Sierra study, as well as the data collected from the American Academy of Ophthalmology's IRIS registry, shows that average vision of wet AMD patients on treatment ends up at around 20/80. It's important to note that functional vision needed to do things like drive a car without restrictions requires at least 20/40 vision in most states. The most likely reason for the less than ideal vision outcome was that we were unable to diagnose and start treatment early enough. We were falling behind this very fast-moving disease.
At the same time, another major clinical trial was being run called the ARIDS-2 home study. The goal was to determine if a device used by patients at home would help physicians detect the conversion to wet AMD early, leading to better long-term visual outcomes as shown in multiple trials. The device used a test called preferential hyperacuity perimetry, or PHP, which effectively uses our innate ability to pick up on very slight distortions in aligned objects, which is a key indicator of potential wet AMD conversion.
The results of the home study were astonishing, and the 4C home device from Notel Vision demonstrated impactful results. So much so that the FDA decided to stop the trial early, given the utility of the device. We started prescribing the device because the clinical value was high, understanding that the logistics of managing it would be difficult. There was no way the results of the home study could be replicated in a real-world setting. Or at least, that's what we thought.
A team of dedicated retina specialists committed to understanding the best ways to help their AMD patients undertook a detailed 10-year retrospective study called the ALOFT study. To answer the question, does home monitoring really help AMD patients in the real world? We talked to Dr. Miguel Busquets from Retina Associates of Kentucky, who was part of this inquisitive group of clinicians, to understand the findings.
It required a lot of data crunching. We primarily wanted to study what the long-term outcomes for the patients on the program looked like. That is, at what level of visual acuity were we actually able to catch the conversion to wet disease? And were the patients able to maintain the visual function following treatment? We were also interested in some very important secondary outcomes. We wanted to see how compliant patients were on the program and how that compliance was impacted over the years.
The results of the ALOFT study were published in the peer-reviewed Ophthalmology Retina Journal in 2022.
ALOFT showed incredible outcomes. The mean visual acuity for the patients who converted to wet AMD was 2039 when treatment was initiated. If we compare this to real-world data from sources like the IRIS registry or reported in the Sierra study, we are effectively getting twice the visual acuity. And on average, patients had a visual acuity of 2032 after their last recorded follow-up exam following treatment. These were very interesting findings. Being able to maintain this level of functional vision meant that these patients could continue driving and/or maintain their daily quality of life. Looking at it from another angle, 82% of patients on 4C Home were able to maintain their functional vision, whereas only 31% of the general wet AMD population has functional vision. We also wanted to dig further into the study and understand patient compliance. We saw patients were performing 5.2 tests per week, which is more than sufficient to effectively monitor and act on conversion from dry to wet AMD. This level of compliance was astonishing and one we don't usually see in medicine. We are really looking at a new digital health paradigm that is worth exploring and understanding.
Further exploration was indeed warranted, so we decided to talk to professionals from the monitoring center maintained by Notal Vision and patients enrolled in the 4C Home AMD monitoring program to better understand the key elements behind the program.